Hi guys, welcome to Midnight Anime Library. I summoned the 8 demons and the world government panicked. One Piece Part 6 Chapter 101, Prisoner Melee. Ice Age. Roxio kicked away a prisoner who was trying to escape and fell down, as if throwing out trash. At the same time, he looked at the heavy convicts with cold eyes. This sudden scene made everyone's expressions change instantly. Those who were swept by Roxio's gaze had sweat profusely dripping from their foreheads. What's going on? Wasn't Roxio on their side? Why is he suddenly killing his own people? Roxio, what is he doing? Damn it, doesn't he want to get out? The prisoners' faces were extremely grim. Their minds were a mess. Things had progressed to this point, and the goal of escaping Impel Down was within reach. Unexpectedly, Roxio suddenly appeared midway to intercept them. As fellow prisoners confined to level 6, everyone instinctively assumed they were on the same side. Their common enemies were the Marine Headquarters Admiral and powerful figures of the world government like Magellan. At this moment, the prisoners looked at each other, not daring to make any extra moves. But all their gazes were fixed on Roxio, who stood at the passageway. Confusion, fear, and unease were mixed together. Even prisoners who had been confined in Impel Down for many years could tell. If Roxio could kill one person without hesitation, he could certainly kill a second. For a time, no one dared to flee towards the exit. Compared to the Admiral, Roxio in front of them seemed even more terrifying. Think carefully with your rusty brains. Why would Roxio do this? At this moment, a man over 3 m tall, with a large, robust build and a wide jaw, stepped out from the shadows and said coldly. Everyone looked over, and one person exclaimed with fear in their voice, Shiryu of the Rain. The former head jailer of Impel Down, whose strength was second only to Magellan, was now a heavy convict on level 6. Shiryu of the Rain, who was designated a prisoner by Magellan for his love of torturing inmates, had also come out. Before, Magellan had ordered the jailers to release him individually, but Shiryu of the Rain killed the jailers the moment he was out. As for helping Impel Down fight Roxio, Shiryu didn't even consider it and simply abandoned the idea. A guy who could make the entire Marine Headquarters a headache on his own was no simple character, and besides, there seemed to be many devils behind him. In comparison, escaping with Roxio was a good choice. Why would he do this? Some simple-minded, brawny fellows who had been in their cells for too long racked their brains. Bullet, the Lonely Red, and others silently observed the situation. They naturally knew why Roxio was acting this way. After all, even with their strength, they had to pay a price to get out. It was impossible for these small fry to gain freedom. Suddenly, a quick-witted fellow among the prisoners' eyes lit up. He couldn't help Roxio now. But that didn't mean he wouldn't be able to in the future. Thinking of this, he knelt on one knee with a thud. He swore that after getting out, he would do his best to work for Roxio. Instantly, one person figured it out, and other prisoners followed suit, mimicking his actions. In the world of pirates, strength is inherently revered, and with freedom at stake, the choice was almost effortless. For a time, throughout Impel Down's level 6, prisoners dressed in striped clothing knelt on one knee before another young prisoner in stripes. This scene made Kizaru and Akainu, who were currently battling Bogard, twitch their mouths. They had something to say, but it seemed to be stuck in their throats. Similarly, at Marineford, the high-ranking Marine officials watching the Impel Down broadcast were even more shaken. Damn it! Roxio's influence is starting to turn into power. Fleet Admiral Sengoku's braided beard trembled violently. The anger in his eyes was almost substantial. The heavy convicts on level 6 were all extremely dangerous. Any one of them released outside would be enough to shake the 4 seas. Even on the Grand Line, they could easily occupy a territory, unchallenged. But now, they were actually willing to lower themselves before a young prisoner. Without a doubt, this was due to Roxio's displayed strength and the additional effect brought by the hidden devils behind him. People naturally admire strength. He could already imagine. If all the devils were to appear, the strong individuals of the sea would surely flock to him. Roxyu's power would become increasingly vast.
Just thinking about it made Sengoku feel a blockage in his heart. A surge of chi was stifled in his chest.
Inside Impel Down, Roxyu looked at the prisoners with an indifferent gaze and said coldly, "Time is limited. Let's see your strength."
The other meaning of this sentence was, "I only need the most powerful ones."
The prisoners who understood Roxyu's meaning, their eyes instantly turned bloodshot. A powerful aura swept out. Compared to facing a monster like Roxyu, they preferred to act against prisoners whose strength was unknown. Immediately,
the scene became chaotic.
And at this moment, Akainu's roar came from above, great eruption.
He took advantage of Kizaru's attack on Bogard, striking decisively with lightning speed.
Rather than letting these damned prisoners follow Roxyu and escape from Impel Down, this iron-fisted and dominant admiral unhesitatingly chose forceful suppression, burning all prisoners to ashes with magma, annihilating them within Impel Down.
The moment he finished speaking,
a giant lava fist, formed of magma, shot out with the impact of a volcanic eruption. Its power was enough to pulverize large icebergs many times its size. And the moment the fist shot out,
great eruption exploded into countless volcanic bombs, each capable of easily destroying a large warship.
The volcanic bombs covered the entire level 6, and
the scorching high temperature was terrifying. Under the evaporation of this extremely high temperature, the ice from level 5's freezing hell was slowly melting.
Damn it! It's Akainu! The prisoners were in disarray. In just a moment, more than a dozen heavy convicts were melted by the magma. Rumble! Massive volcanic bombs bombarded the structures within Impel Down.
Terrifying energy raged, and magma melted bricks and stones.
Seawater is pouring in. Impel Down is going to be submerged.
Due to Bogard's appearance, Impel Down, already scarred and tottering from Roxyu and Magellan's fight, was on the verge of collapse.
Now, after being battered by Kizaru and Akainu, another great eruption struck.
Even the extremely sturdy Impel Down, known as the safest prison in the world, couldn't withstand it.
Seawater was frantically pouring into level 6. Akainu and Kizaru retreated rapidly, their faces extremely grim.
They were Logia ability users, and seawater was their greatest fear.
However, their brows soon relaxed.
The seawater was freezing at an astonishing speed.
A familiar voice rang in their ears. Ice Age. Chapter 102, The Three Admirals Gather. Outside Impel Down, the backflowing seawater instantly froze into ice. A tall figure landed on the ice.
The chilling air beneath his feet continuously spread outward.
The speed at which the cold air spread was unbelievable. Wherever the cold air enveloped, a layer of frost quickly condensed and covered the surface. Only a few short seconds passed since the figure landed. Looking around, the flowing seawater inside level 6 of Impel Down was already completely encased in a thick layer of ice. Even the walls that hadn't been soaked by the seawater were covered in frost. The biting cold air blew through the space, completely dissipating the previous scorching heat, leaving behind an unbearable chill. At this moment, level 5, freezing hell seemed to seamlessly merge with level 6. The entire exterior of Impel Down was covered in ice. Kuzan. Seeing Akiji arrive, Akainu and Kizaru both slowly exhaled. The pressure on them lessened somewhat.
In the current situation, just the two of them might not have been able to subdue Roxyu and Bogard.
The addition of an admiral-level fighter significantly increased their odds of victory. So this is Demon Bogard. Akiji's expression was shocked, his gaze fixed entirely on the massive Demon Bogard. Sengoku had already given a brief explanation of the situation's origins and development.
But what he hadn't expected was this.
That the two admirals, Akainu and Kizaru, still hadn't managed to defeat the opponent. Is this what a demon is like? Just one of them was enough to tie down two admiral-level combatants. This demon is extremely troublesome. Use your devil fruit ability. See if you can freeze it. Kizaru changed his approach, suggesting a new path. Bogard's body hardness was too monstrous.
If they continued to wear him down, even if they could break his defense, the stamina consumption would be too great. It would be better to use the power of ice to see if they could restrict Bogard's movements. After that, they could arrest Roxiu and then focus all their strength on Demon Bogard. Akiji nodded. It seemed the current situation was worse than he had imagined. This was certainly a viable solution.
The Fleet Admiral has been informed of the situation inside Impel Down. Large reinforcements will be arriving next.
Akainu and Kizaru exchanged glances. This was good news.
Hey! Are you perhaps ignoring me?
Roxiu looked at the three admirals of the Navy with interest and said slowly. The Navy's top-tier combat forces, the Dogbird Monkey, had actually gathered simultaneously. The Navy truly held him in high regard. But if they wanted to team up against Bogard, they had to ask for his permission first.
Bogard! Be serious! Then, Roxiu turned his head to look at the second demon. The upcoming battle would be somewhat tricky. After all, the three admirals, plus Magellan. Their combined strength was not something easily dealt with. He. Got it. Even if another one comes, it won't matter. Bogard's scarlet pupils showed no trace of fear, only mockery. As his voice fell, Bogard raised his arm and violently plunged it into the ground. His massive palm connected with the earth. Demonic power circulated from his body and gathered in his arm. Buzz! Immediately after, Bogard lifted with force. Cracking and scraping sounds occurred incessantly. What's going on? Why is the ground starting to tilt? It's Bogard. The prisoners who were fighting each other noticed the change in their surroundings. The solid ground constructed from massive bluestone slabs. Under Bogard's demonic power, it was completely ripped open. Then, he violently hurled it toward the three admirals of the Navy. Hell Dog! Ice Block, Pheasant Beak! Ama no Murakumo Sword! The three admirals maintained grim expressions, their gazes locked onto the massive, sky-obscuring stone slab hurtling towards them. They spoke almost simultaneously. The dazzling yellow light. The scorching, explosive magma. The bone-chilling ice crystal phoenix. Intertwined and shone brilliantly in this shattered space. The terrifying aura alone was enough to make people feel suffocated. The prisoners who had escaped from other levels of Impel Down, as well as the personnel stationed inside Impel Down. Feeling the terrifying aura filling the space, they all stopped what they were doing, their expressions changing drastically. It's the three admirals of the Navy. How could the three admirals appear in Impel Down at the same time? Wait, what's with this massive, green-skinned monster? And that young man standing on the monster's shoulder. Could it be because of them? Only now did the people caught in the chaos notice the situation on the lower levels. They looked down through the shattered floors. A single glance was enough to fill them with terror and shock. Boom! A violent explosion roared out, no less deafening than a giant cannonball detonation. Light burst forth. Broken stones flew everywhere. Energy sufficient to obliterate a small island poured out. Fine cracks appeared in the thick ice encasing Impel Down. The colossal sea kings drawn by the massive sound scattered immediately upon sensing the terrifying aura sealed within the ice. Before the smoke and dust could settle, another explosive shout rang out. Poison Dragon! Several twisting streams of dense, purple poisonous liquid surged toward Roxiu. Thud! Roxiu tapped his foot on the ground. His figure shot out like a cannonball, heading straight for Magellan. In just half a breath, Roxiu broke through the long, coiled mass of poisonous liquid and landed a punch squarely on Magellan's face. Dog bite Crimson Lotus. Akainu's eyes flashed with intensity, taking advantage of Roxiu's engagement with Magellan. His scorching magma fist seized the opportunity to sneak attack Roxiu from behind. You really are a dog. Feeling the high temperature behind him, Roxiu muttered. His figure instantly vanished from the spot.
His body twisted, using his waist as a pivot point, and he threw another punch, smashing toward Akainu's side.
Thud. Magma splattered everywhere, and hot air billowed. Damn it! We can't stay here anymore. Just the aftermath of the battle is enough to kill us. Hurry, go to other levels. The prisoners remaining in level 6, after their own slaughter, had dwindled from dozens to just over 10.
The ground was littered with the corpses of the other prisoners. Even so, these strong individuals who had survived the slaughter were shaken when they felt the battle raging between the three admirals, Magellan, and monsters like Roxiu. They were still deeply terrified, their expressions extremely grim. In front of these people, even they couldn't withstand the pressure. The violet energy splashing out meant
instant death or severe injury if struck.
The Lonely Red surveyed the surrounding environment, activating his top-tier observation haki, searching for blind spots suitable for escape. Finally, his gaze settled on Roxiu.
Roxiu, when you get out, I will come looking for you.
If this were before, if he wanted to leave, he wouldn't bother saying such nonsense, nor would he comply with any damned agreement made inside Impel Down after leaving.
His solitary nature would not change for anyone.
But after witnessing Roxiu's strength and the forces hidden behind him, he knew that if he didn't comply, he was highly likely to face a pursuit more terrifying than anything from Marineford.
Weighing the options, it was easy to choose the correct answer. Roxiu didn't reply, merely nodding.
The Lonely Red was a cunning fellow, and a smart man.
Smart people didn't need to say too much. The next moment,
having received Roxiu's approval, the Lonely Red vanished, retreating into Impel Down.
Meanwhile, on the other side, an entire mighty fleet was sailing toward Impel Down. Chapter 103, Damn it! Are admirals supposed to be amazing?
On the calm sea surface, the steel warship, built by the Royal Shipyard Water 7, cut through strings of white waves. The sea breeze caused the Justice flag erected on the deck to flutter loudly.
20,000 elite marine soldiers stood neatly on the gigantic hull, their expressions solemn.
Marine Vice Admirals Mole, Yamakaji, Doberman, Enigmo, as well as Strawberry and Dalmatian, looked towards the distant sea horizon with grave expressions.
What's going on? Is the Marine taking major action again recently? What happened? Is the Marineford execution going to be moved up? Marineford execution? Your news is way too outdated. Roxiu wasn't caught by the Marine at all. This is all the Marine misleading people. Then where is the Marine going with such a massive mobilization? Looking at the direction the warship is heading, it seems to be towards the calm belt.
Passing by some islands along the way, some nosy pirates and civilians who liked to watch the excitement noticed the mighty Marine fleet and discussed it animatedly.
It really is the calm belt. Could it be that they are going to arrest a gigantic sea king? No, why would they deploy so many troops just to arrest a sea king? Something major must have happened that requires forceful suppression. The only thing located in this part of the calm belt seems to be Impel Down, the great underwater prison. Could it be that something happened at Impel Down? A pirate exclaimed, realizing something. That's even more impossible. Impel Down is known as the Iron Wall. It has stood in the calm belt for many years and has never had an incident since its construction. Moreover, Magellan is stationed there. Inside Impel Down, he is practically invincible. Alas! It's a shame that ordinary ships can't sail in the calm belt, otherwise we could follow from a distance to see. Something big must be happening. Put away your foolish curiosity, and maybe you'll live a little longer. Meanwhile, as these pirates were discussing, some special departments dedicated to collecting information on events around the world also noticed the Marines' movements. In the sky, a flock of albatrosses flapped their wings, circling rapidly. After a few calls, they followed the warship toward Impel Down. Inside Impel Down, the battle was still ongoing. Boom! Thump, thump, thump. Earth-shattering explosions continued incessantly. The entirety of Impel Down had become dilapidated, covered everywhere with ruins left by the battle. Blazing light, freezing ice shards, scorching magma, and highly toxic purple liquid continuously overlapped and erupted.
If it weren't for Akiji's freezing power, Impeldown would have already collapsed and sunk into the seabed. And after a period of entanglement, Admiral Kizaru and Akiji had fully realized how troublesome Bogard was. This monster was like a giant steel balloon, unbelievably hard. Even attacks capable of destroying small islands, when landing on it, would at most break through a layer of fat, failing to cause substantial damage. At this moment, they realized the seriousness of the problem. This demon Bogard, putting everything else aside, his physical strength alone far surpassed that of Big Mom, one of the 4 emperors, known as Big Mom the Steel Balloon.
Where did this demon pop out from? It doesn't seem like a creature from this world at all. Freezing doesn't work either,
Kizaru said with a fierce expression.
Akiji's freezing power simply couldn't restrain Bogard's movements. He would break free within a few seconds.
With this enormous body and terrifying destructive power, they would believe it if someone said Big Mom, one of the 4 emperors, was here.
Watch out! Just as he was complaining, Bogard's deadly throw arrived in front of him. Kizaru frowned, his figure transforming into a photon to dodge the attack. The only thing worth celebrating is this guy isn't fast. Kizaru's figure landed on an ice sculpture, and he said coldly in his heart. However, this wasn't exactly good news. You must understand, they were admirals. The peak fighting force of this world. The combined strength of the 2 of them was enough to sweep aside any top-tier powerhouse. This was not just talk. But now, they were being restrained by Bogard. If this continued, the continuous depletion of stamina would lead the situation to become increasingly worse. Thinking of this,
Kizaru and Akiji instinctively looked towards Akainu and Magellan, who were dealing with Roxio, and then, their eyes twitched violently. The situation for those 2 seemed even worse compared to theirs. Against Bogard, they could still rely on speed and haki to maneuver. Although they couldn't inflict massive damage on the opponent, they wouldn't appear overly passive. But facing Roxio, they seemed to have to constantly watch out for close-range surprise attacks. It was incredibly difficult.
Hey! Borsellino! Where are you looking?
Just then, a voice filled with playful mockery suddenly rang out. Hearing this, Kizaru used his observation haki to lock onto the speaker.
Bullet!
His heart sank. What should come, came.
Bullet hadn't made a move before, and Kizaru thought he might slip away in the chaos, just like the Lonely Red. He couldn't be bothered to deal with that. After all, compared to these people, capturing Roxio was the priority, and it wasn't worth diverting energy to fight them. But unexpectedly, Bullet ignored the path to freedom and insisted on having a confrontation. Truly a simple-minded, brawny fellow. Demon form. Bullet, unaware of Kizaru's thoughts, had a fierce expression and stared intently at Admiral Kizaru.
The show was almost over, and the situation was gradually becoming clear.
Although he could sneak away in the chaos, that was boring. He certainly didn't want the opponent to actually be defeated by the Marine.
As his voice fell, powerful haki emanated from his body and then merged. His entire body was covered in pitch-black armament haki, making him look like a demon from hell.
Bang! A loud explosion came from the ground. Bullet's figure instantly vanished, leaving an afterimage where he stood. A punch fell toward Kizaru's cheek. Yada no Kagami.
Kizaru's momentum dropped, and he clasped his hands together, one above the other, in front of him.
As the light beam refracted, his figure shifted to the side, avoiding Bullet's haki attack. However, before he could stabilize himself, a figure followed closely behind. Desert King Treasure Blade. 4 giant sand blades slashed down from above. Crocodile, filled with rage and indignation, added another attack. His expression seemed to say, "You have this day coming, too?" Boom! The sand blade landed, splashing up a cloud of grit. But it did not hit Kizaru. The strength of an admiral was fundamentally not something he could challenge right now, even with a surprise attack. A long sword flashing with dazzling light blocked the 4 sand blades. Crocodile. Work with us Marines to deal with Roxyu. I'll declare you innocent.
Kizaru attempted to turn Crocodile, pulling him over to his side.
Judge your mother. Crocodile roared loudly. Are admirals supposed to be amazing? Damn it! Do you really think Sand Crocodile, famed across the 4 seas, has no temper?
Hearing this, Kizaru's face turned cold. Shing, the Ama no Murakumo sword slashed sharply upwards, force pouring into it, sending Crocodile flying.
Boom!
The figure of Sand Crocodile traced a long line in the air before crashing down near Roxyu, who was fighting Akainu and Magellan.
Chapter 104, What are you waiting for? Hurry up and run. Crocodile. Are you bowing down to me?
Roxyu muttered, glancing at Crocodile, who had slammed both knees onto the ground, perfectly forming a kneeling posture, even while Roxyu was fighting.
I don't accept weaklings who get easily knocked away by a single sword strike from Kizaru. Cough, cough. Crocodile stood up, choked by the remark. Roxyu. Our business isn't finished yet.
Don't think I dealt with Kizaru to help you, he said coldly.
Roxyu shrugged. A good chance. Poison Fugu. Hell dog.
And just in the gap while Roxyu's clone was speaking, Akainu and Magellan's expressions shifted. Seizing the moment, they struck instantly. Violent magma surged with scorching heat, and purple venom resembled hellish demonic water capable of swallowing everything.
It soared through the air. In just half a breath, it arrived right in front of Roxyu. Boom! Roxyu's eyes narrowed, and he struck out fiercely with both fists, meeting the opponent's attacks. Following that, he felt a searing pain in his arms. His figure was sent flying backward. He smashed into the wall, scattering debris. A hit. Magellan's face lit up with joy. He couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. After struggling with Roxyu for so long, this was the first time they had directly hit him and sent him flying. However, Akainu, standing nearby, showed little change in expression. If the opponent were truly that easy to deal with, it would be great. It really is troublesome without hockey. Meanwhile, Roxyu shook the dust off his body and stood up from the collapsed stones. One of his arms was being corroded by magma, and the other was covered in a layer of purple venom. It looked terrible. Although my physical fitness is decent, the Admiral's attacks are still effective. Akainu truly deserves to be called a powerhouse with maximum damage output. He definitely has the strength. He forcefully shook his arm, scattering the purple venom and dissipating the scorching magma. The bone-deep wounds healed at a visible speed. In a short time, they were restored to normal. Magellan's expression instantly turned grim. This Roxyu is too monstrous. Akainu slowly exhaled. It was within expectations. He shifted his gaze toward Roxyu's head. Perhaps, attacking there would be effective. Are you treating me like Whitebeard? Roxyu felt the fiery gaze in Akainu's eyes and clenched his fist, saying. The next moment, his aura suddenly erupted. Controlling explosive flames, he charged toward the opponents. But right at this moment, a huge explosion sounded from above and fell down. They saw Bogard, now free from Kizaru's restraint, a hint of mockery flashing in his scarlet eyes. Roar! His massive, sharp-toothed mouth opened, and an invisible wind swept through the entire interior of Impel Down. Some weaker jailer prisoners were instantly sucked in, becoming food in Bogard's belly. At the same time, Bogard's body swelled drastically. His body, which originally spanned level 6 and level 5, instantly tripled in size. His enormous body pressed against Impel Down, making it groan under the strain and seem ready to collapse. Bogard's body is giantizing, Roxyu murmured inwardly as he watched. This was an ability unique to Bogard. This saves a lot of trouble. What's going on? What is this monster? Is this the cause of the riot inside Impel Down? The prisoners in Level 1, Level 2, who were still in a state of confusion, had their expressions changed dramatically.
They looked in horror at the supersized monster before them. The chill from their feet shot straight to their heads. However, compared to them, those who were even more shocked were the Marine admirals and the others. Bogart could actually supersize. This was completely beyond their expectations. Furthermore, and more importantly, because of Bogart's giantization, the defenses of Impel Down, from top to bottom, were all crushed and destroyed. A natural escape route, running from bottom to top, appeared before all the prisoners. However, one thing was not too bad. Because of Bogart's massive body, the route was completely blocked. This allowed the admirals to breathe a sigh of relief. Akiji's face was icy cold, and his exhaled breath instantly turned into ice shards. We must quickly. However, before he could finish speaking, with a whoosh, Bogart's massive body, which was blocking Impel Down, suddenly vanished. As if it had never existed. Instantly, Akiji's face was filled with astonishment. Where did such a huge Bogart go? How did it disappear? Not just him, but Kizaru, Akaino, Magellan, and everyone else looked completely baffled. What just happened? But before they could recover their senses, what are you waiting for? Let's go! Roxio's voice echoed throughout Impel Down. Roxio had naturally taken Bogart away. The goal of causing chaos in Impel Down and releasing the prisoners had been achieved, which was enough to give the Marine a massive headache. Continuing to fight the admirals served little purpose besides forcing them to defend. As his voice fell, his foot tapped the ground. Boom! A loud explosion erupted. The thick ice surface beneath his feet was instantly shattered, and Roxio's figure shot up, rushing toward level 1. Bullet, Crocodile, and the other surviving heavy convicts reacted, their aura slightly sinking. Figures leaped up from the bottom of level 6. The 3 admirals of the Navy, along with Magellan, exchanged glances, naturally unwilling to let them escape so easily. Tapping their feet lightly, their figures followed closely behind. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The people who were originally fighting in level 6 of the great undersea prison rushed rapidly toward the top of Impel Down, soaring past the other levels like shooting arrows. What's going on? Are those the heavy convicts from level 6? Wait, and Warden Magellan. The prisoners on the upper levels watched the figures rushing out, their pupils contracting. It's the Marine admirals. Sakazuki, Borsellino, and Kuzan. A man with a red nose and a blue ponytail was so terrified when he saw the 3 Marine admirals rushing up from below that his head and body instantly separated. Why would there be 3 Marine admirals below Impel Down? This completely defied common sense. At the same time, inside Marineford, the Marine headquarters, the high-ranking Marine officers, seeing Bogart's body swell, then suddenly disappear, and realizing the heavy convicts were about to burst out of Impel Down, felt their hearts sink to rock bottom. The situation inside Impel Down was developing into an extremely bad state. 3 Marine admirals, plus Magellan, were surprisingly unable to restrain Roxio and the others. Contact the surveillance personnel near Impel Down. Switch the screen to the view outside Impel Down, Sengoku said coldly. The screen inside the conference hall only showed the situation inside Impel Down, there was no view of the outside. Soon, under the operation of Marine soldiers and Impel Down staff, the screen on the wall switched to a distant view. Impel Down was encased within a layer of thick ice. Outside the ice, the fleet dispatched by the Marines slowly sailed into the frame. Chapter 105, Sengoku's Resolve. Even if Impel Down is at stake, he won't hesitate. Fleet reinforcements have arrived. Sengoku stood up from his chair, feeling a little calmer. Not just him, everyone present brightened up. The timing was just right. Burubaru. Burubaru. At this moment, the den mushi on the conference table rang, and Sengoku reached out to answer it. Marshal, we have reached our destination. Should we launch a general attack? The muffled voice of Vice Admiral Mole came from the other end of the phone. Notify personnel inside Impel Down to evacuate to a safe zone. Launch a general attack. Sengoku gave the order without hesitation, his tone filled with anger and gravity.
Sengoku, wait a moment. Vice Admiral Tsuru said urgently, quickly interrupting. If we directly cover it with artillery fire, Impel Down might be destroyed. Do we need to report to the world government first? The great underwater prison, in terms of hierarchy, does not fall under marine jurisdiction.
Like Eni's lobby, it is one of the branches directly under the world government, and there is no direct command authority between organizations of the same rank. The power generated by the Marine Fleet's general attack would be no less, and perhaps even greater, than a buster call. It is very likely that under this terrifying artillery bombardment, Impel Down would be reduced to ruins.
The current situation
was already unfavorable for the marine side.
First, Roxio killed a celestial dragon and paraded around brazenly.
Then, Roxio annihilated Marine G2 branch, intimidating the Marines. Whether it was Marineford or the world government, their credibility among the public was greatly diminished. At this time, using marine artillery to bombard the world government's Impel Down, if word got out, would undoubtedly add insult to injury for the credibility of the Marines and the world government.
Your concerns are indeed valid. But at this point, do we have a choice?
It was Garp who spoke. He didn't care much for the so-called world government. He only knew that the prisoners locked in Impel Down were about to escape and continue to roam free. If no measures were taken and they were allowed to slip away, who knew what troubles they would cause then?
Moreover, Roxio escaping right under his nose. This was something he absolutely did not want to see.
Compared to some damn reputation, in his opinion, it was more reliable to eliminate these scourges with swift and decisive action.
Sengoku shared his thoughts. If something goes wrong, I will bear the responsibility. Today, these damned pirates must pay the price. Especially Roxio. Even if Impel Down is at stake,
I will not flinch. If he were to report to the world government at this moment, after a series of procedures, those prisoners would have long vanished. This was simply impossible. Moreover, the battle between the marine admirals and the prisoners had already reached a fever pitch. If he, as the marshal, were to retreat at this time, it would be disrespectful to the fallen soldiers. At worst, if problems arose afterward, someone else could take the marshal's position. But as long as he was in office for a day, the justice of the Marines had to be upheld by someone.
Continue to execute,
Sengoku said in a deep voice, firmly giving the order.
Yes, Marshal.
Mole hung up the Den Mushi, commanding the Marine Fleet to form a formation and slowly approach the frozen layer outside Impel Down.
Outside Impel Down,
figures shot up from the huge breach in the city. The albatrosses circling in the sky, and the military seagulls carrying Den Mushi in their beaks, flapped their wings and flew higher. Roxio, Bullet, Crocodile, Shiryu of the Rain, and some heavy convicts who survived the slaughter in battle, landed on the frozen layer outside.
The 3 Marine Admirals and Impel Down Warden Magellan
then leaped out, landing on the other side. Headquarters support has arrived. Akiji exhaled a cold breath, his eyes fixed on the Marine Fleet that had entered his sight and was docked outside the ice layer. Akainu and Kizaru nodded, then the 3 exchanged glances, lightly tapped their feet on the ice, and leaped again, landing on the deck of San Juan Wolf.
Admiral Sakazuki, Admiral Borsellino, Admiral Kuzan.
Marine Vice Admirals, Rear Admirals, and Marine soldiers immediately greeted the 3 Marine Admirals with respect.
What did the Marshal say? Akainu asked Vice Admiral Mole in a deep voice. Launch a general attack. Excellent.
A rare hint of excitement appeared on Akainu's stern face. If at this moment, the Marshal, under pressure, had ordered them to retreat, he would have truly gone berserk on the spot.
At the same time, Magellan also noticed the arrival of the Marine Fleet.
His heart immediately tightened. There was no need to ask, he knew this meant a full-scale artillery attack on Impel Down, turning it into a buster call target. However, at this point, there was no other way. A baptism was indeed needed to end this damned struggle.
Otherwise, if the prisoners escaped, the consequences would be unimaginable. The next moment,
He leaped up, returned inside Impel Down, and notified his subordinates to ignore the prisoners and first go hide in the safe underground areas built in Impel Down.
Damn it! How did the Marine fleet appear here?
Crocodile, next to Roxiu, twitched his mouth and looked at the Marine forces lined up like an iron wall, his face instantly turning grim. He had thought freedom was within reach after getting out. He never expected the first thing he'd see would be a scene like this.
It's a buster call.
Bullet's face was equally grim, his chest heaving, and his heart involuntarily sped up, as if remembering something bad. More than 20 years ago, he was arrested and imprisoned in Impel Down by the Marines precisely because the buster call gradually exhausted his stamina. Now, having just escaped Impel Down, he saw a buster call formation again. It was truly bad news.
No! It's not a buster call. Soon, Bullet noticed the difference.
A buster call consists of 10 warships, 5 vice admirals, and elite marine forces. But there were more than 10 warships here, and at least twice as many marine soldiers as a buster call.
Not to mention the marine vice admirals and rear admirals. Things seemed to have gotten a bit bad. Even Bullet, who had always been relaxed, couldn't help but feel uneasy at this moment. He could easily destroy 1 or 2 warships. But the power unleashed by a group of warships combined was not simply an additive effect. Moreover, there were 3 marine admirals assisting. Roxiu, how do you plan to get out? For some reason, Bullet subconsciously looked at Roxiu, asking for his opinion.
As soon as he spoke, swish, swish, swish. The other heavy convicts all turned their gazes to the young man. It seemed that in the current situation, only Roxiu could bring a shred of comfort to their restless hearts. Roxiu felt their burning gazes and slowly said,
"Aren't the Marines bringing their warships over?
We'll just leave on a warship later."
Chapter 106, what kind of creature is this now? Take a battleship out?
Bullet and the others thought they had misheard, repeating it subconsciously.
What kind of joke is this? Can't you see the swarming Marine soldiers and Marine vice admirals on the battleship?
At this point, let alone taking a battleship, it's a question of whether they can even get out.
Roxiu.
If we get Demon Bogart out, she should be able to withstand the cannon fire.
Crocodile whispered at this moment.
Although he didn't know how Bogart disappeared, as one of the demons, she must be related to Roxiu. If Bogart could reappear, with her size and incredibly strong defense, the marine battleship's cannon fire wouldn't be able to get past her at all.
Roxiu turned to look at Crocodile, and said indifferently, "Are you telling me what to do?" It wasn't that Roxiu didn't want to, but the current environment was different.
Inside Impel Down, due to the thick buildings and sea stone as building material, which was as hard as brick, Bogart could move freely. But outside Impel Down, there was nothing solid, only the ice created by Akiji using his devil fruit ability, and it was already cracked after the battle.
It simply couldn't withstand Bogart's massive size. Before the Marine fleet could even begin its concentrated fire, she would have already fallen into the sea.
Just then, a loud voice suddenly rang out.
Fire!
Buzz, the moment the words fell. The Marine soldiers on the battleships immediately sprang into action, their footsteps constantly echoing on the deck.
Black cannonballs were loaded into the turrets one by one. Boom, boom, boom.
The fuses were lit, and the cannonballs instantly shot out of the barrels.
Black ammunition, covering the sky, rained down on Impel Down. Everyone's expressions instantly changed drastically. Deviled medium bullet form. Desert greatsword. Instantly, a tremendous aura swept through the crowd.
Bullet used his combine fruit ability to merge himself with the thruster and transform into a giant robot.
Crocodile, holding a giant sand blade, slashed at the continuously falling black cannonballs.
Shiryu of the Rain, and the other prisoners, all used their signature techniques to resist the baptism of cannon fire from the Marines.
Boom, boom, boom. Thump, thump, thump. The extreme explosions, deafening collisions, and the cracking sound of ice shattering made their ears ache. Yada no Kagami. Meteor volcano. As the marine battleships fired their first wave of cannonballs, Kizaru and Akainu soared into the air.
The former transformed into a dazzling ball of light, with scattered light bullets mixing with the black cannonballs, raining down continuously.
The latter's arms turned
into searing magma, like two crimson turrets, from which giant magma fists wrapped in heat waves shot out one by one. Then they disappeared into the sky. Subsequently, in the overcast sky, the giant magma fists transformed into falling meteors, violently smashing into the ground.
Dark cannonballs, dazzling light bullets, and scorching meteor fists. The three combined.
The energy unleashed was enough to flatten everything. There were violent explosions everywhere, ice shattering, and energy continuously spilling out.
Ice Age. Akiji froze the seawater again just as the ice layer was about to completely collapse.
Their strategy was to maintain the ice layer in a barely stable state under the premise of concentrated fire. This way, they could eliminate the prisoners under their noses to the greatest extent possible. Meanwhile, inside Impel Down, the prisoners who had finally climbed from other levels to the first level all changed their expressions drastically when they saw the sky full of light, capable of destroying everything.
Damn it! Is this really outside Impel Down? This is too terrifying.
At this moment, lightning crackled, thunder rumbled, comparable to mountains collapsing, shaking heaven and earth.
Even in areas extremely far from Impel Down, the vibrations could be heard. It seems a great battle is happening. It must be the marine fleet that passed by earlier. Could it be that something really went wrong inside Impel Down? It's too terrifying. Who on earth is it that warrants such a large-scale mobilization?
Some curious pirates discussed, their words filled with indescribable shock.
Outside Impel Down.
A burnt smell permeated the air, and a large amount of ash and debris hung suspended, forming thick black smoke that obscured vision. After a while, the sound of explosions gradually subsided, the ice layer on the sea surface shattered again, and amidst the pervasive smoke, the terrifying scene of cannon fire's aftermath was everywhere.
Damn it!
If this continues, we're all going to die.
Crocodile's aura was much weaker than before. This cannon fire baptism was not just a simple buster call. Among it, 3 admirals were also unleashing large-scale abilities. Their power was not much less than the combined damage of all those fleets. Even though most of the people present were top-tier pirates, fighting 10 opponents at once was no problem for them. But the problem was who they were comparing themselves to. Compared to these admirals, they were like lambs to the slaughter, completely unable to fight back. And this was only the first wave of fire attacks. Dealing with it was already tricky enough. The situation would only get more difficult from here. Good effect. The plan is feasible. On the marine battleship, Akainu looked at the dead and wounded prisoners outside Impel Down, his expression improving considerably. Don't be careless. Roxio isn't that easy to deal with. Kizaru muttered. These prisoners were all insignificant characters, the most important one was Roxio. Only by defeating him could it truly be considered a good effect. Akainu and Akiji nodded, agreeing with what Kizaru said. Their gazes simultaneously focused on Roxio's location. Smoke enveloped the area, and visibility was not clear, in fact, it was somewhat pitch black. Akainu noticed something was amiss. What's going on? This blackness was somewhat unsettlingly dark. It didn't look like the smoke produced after an explosion at all. The other 2 admirals also noticed. Observation Haki instantly activated. Wait. What is this thing? At this moment. In their line of sight, the smoke shrouding Roxio was slowly dissipating, and blackness settled in the space. However, something even more shocking came into view. Around Roxio stood some unfamiliar creatures dressed in black, with crimson eyes. They had various forms and exuded monstrous auras. Some wore black masks, some had sharp steel claws, some were huge, thick, and heavy, others were shaped like mantises but had 4 legs, and even more, some had a pair of wings, like bats, soaring in midair. Moreover, there wasn't just one of these creatures, they stood behind Roxio like an entire army. Their crimson eyes were firmly locked onto the marine battleships. Chapter 107, Shadow Legion.
The air seemed to condense into a gel. A suffocating atmosphere spread among the Marines. The Marine soldiers looked at each other, their pupils etched with fear of the unknown.
Uniform black attire. Uniform crimson eyes. Uniform solemnity. What in the world are these things? Even the experienced 3 admirals of the Navy had numerous question marks in their minds. Searching through their past memories, they couldn't find any related information. Are they demons? But, aren't there only 8 great demons?
Things were once again spiraling out of control.
Akainu's features beneath his hat showed no expression. The Marine's understanding of Roxiu was still limited to the 8 great demons.
But the current facts proved that it seemed to be more than just that.
There were other organizations behind him. And being able to stand beside Roxiu, their strength must not be underestimated.
Just facing Roxiu and Bogard alone required a lot of effort. Now, an entire squad of unfamiliar creatures had appeared.
The pressure instantly maxed out.
Bullet and the others, who were desperately resisting the artillery bombardment, also noticed the changes on the battlefield. Their expressions were filled with surprise and uncertainty. But compared to the Marines, their situation was still much better.
Are these people Roxiu's subordinates? They look far from simple. Such strong killing intent and cohesion. How did they appear just now? I didn't sense anything at all. Crocodile? Bullet called out to the knowledgeable sand crocodile, asking for an explanation.
Crocodile was equally bewildered, his expression conveying one signal.
Why don't you just ask Roxiu directly? And just as everyone was astonished. Click.
The sound of cannon shells being loaded onto the warship rang out.
No matter what they are, they will be annihilated by artillery fire.
Akainu's voice grew colder.
If he couldn't figure it out, he simply wouldn't think about it.
As long as these guys were all killed, what they were didn't matter anymore.
Don't be careless.
Kizaru's eyes were fixed on the black figures behind Roxiu, and for some reason, his heart rate was accelerating.
That bad feeling once again surfaced in his mind. Ice block, partisan.
Akiji, a man of few words but fierce action, spread his hands and struck out decisively. Icy long spears appeared around him, emitting wisps of cold air.
At the same time, Akainu and Kizaru quickly wiped the expressions from their faces. Ready to launch the next wave of attacks. All personnel, listen up. Organize the next bombardment.
As his voice fell, the cannon shells were once again assembled.
And just then, Roxiu, standing on the ice, raised his arm and pointed towards the Marine warships. Go! The moment he spoke, the Ghost Shadow Legion behind Roxiu instantly dispersed, their target directly the Marine warships. Humph! Just in time. Beneath Akainu's gloomy face, a hint of ruthlessness was hidden.
The best method was a large-scale decisive strike. Once those black creatures charged forward, he would suppress them with overwhelming force. However, just as he was about to unleash another large-scale ability, a bizarre scene occurred. Those shadow soldiers did not rush forward at high speed as he had imagined. Instead, they disintegrated on the spot, turning into a mass of shadows, attaching themselves to the ice surface. As if they had no physical form at all. In the blink of an eye, the blue ice covering the outside of Impel Down was dyed inky black. The scattered rays of light from the sun in the dome fell upon it, instantly being swallowed. Immediately after, these creatures, transformed into black shadows, moved freely through this space like swimming snakes. They couldn't be locked onto at all. What kind of ability is this? Akainu's brow furrowed into a river shape, understanding less and less. One person he could understand as a devil fruit ability user. After all, Mariah, one of the Shichibukai, could manipulate shadows and use them to fight. But how could this entire group be explained? Yet, before he could ponder further, a scream from a soldier came from one of the warships. A clawed assassin soldier, with sharp claws, tore open his body, and blood splattered on the deck, looking extremely gruesome, causing a stir among those nearby.
Soon, one black shadow after another swam onto the marine warships, then took shape. In just a moment,
the Shadow Legion gathered behind Roxio had all arrived before the marine soldiers. On over a dozen warships, the sounds of battle instantly erupted.
Damn it, what the hell are these things? Shoot, quick, shoot. So fast. My flintlock was cut. Bastard, his body is growing. My shadow, he's eating my shadow, watch out for the sky, they can fire light waves.
The orderly marines were instantly overwhelmed.
Sounds of fear and screams rose and fell. Calm down.
The marine vice admirals roared, looking at the chaotic soldiers.
The next moment. Clang, clang, clang.
The sounds of swords being drawn followed one after another. Gleaming sharp blades, flashing with cold light, charged towards the bizarre Shadow Legion.
Battle was imminent. The three admirals' eyes were bloodshot, watching the black creatures slaughtering the marine soldiers, rage surging in their hearts. But they couldn't directly attack the black creatures. Firstly, the black soldiers were too dispersed. Secondly, these black soldiers had boarded the warships right under their noses. If they attacked, their devil fruit abilities would instantly sink the warships. Roxiu. Akainu abruptly turned his head. His gaze fixed on the culprit behind all this. He believed that if Roxiu was eliminated, these black creatures would surely disperse and collapse. Feeling the scorching gaze, Roxiu's dark eyes met Akainu's.
After leaving Impel Down, he actually didn't want to use the Shadow Legion. This was one of his unknown trump cards. In a world where the strong prey on the weak, the more trump cards one has, the stronger their life-saving ability, especially when being targeted by the Marines. But he hadn't expected the Marines to intercept him outside at this time. He exhaled a turbid breath. The next moment, Roxiu stomped his foot on the ground. A boom sounded behind him. Charge! Hearing Roxiu's words, Bullet and the others instantly understood. Swish, swish, swish. Figures leaped up. Without the sky-obscuring artillery fire to block them, they immediately followed Roxiu's lead. But how could the three admirals of the Navy allow Roxiu to leave so easily? Whoosh, whoosh. Several ice spears shot by Akiji pierced through the sky, instantly arriving before Roxiu. The ice condensed the air, carrying a biting cold capable of freezing everything, and the offensive was decisive. Roxiu advanced instead of retreating, his fists striking the ice spears, unleashing power that instantly shattered the spears. Hell dog! And just then, Akainu, transformed into magma, appeared before Roxiu. At this moment, he didn't care about anything else. Only Roxiu was in his eyes. And only one thought in his mind. Kill Roxiu. Everything would end. Blazing magma, like a falling meteor, slammed down. Akainu, you want to defeat Roxiu? You'll have to get past me first. Bullet cackled from the side, as a giant piece of heavy equipment soared into the air. Chapter 108, Truly Shameless. Boom! The two instantly collided. Rumbling sounds echoed, and flying magma splattered onto the ice, burning out white mist. Thousands of tiny magma droplets scattered across this world. Bullet, even Roger couldn't defeat the Marines. Do you think you can? Akainu landed to the side, his admiral's cloak flapping wildly in the turbulent wind, looking down at Bullet, who had been smashed with a fist, his voice utterly cold. Humph. Roger is Roger. He doesn't represent me. I am destined to surpass him. Bullet wouldn't fall for that. He hadn't spent a single day slacking off during his more than 20 years in Impel Down. He consistently trained and pushed his body to its limits. He was always thinking about how to become stronger, how to surpass Roger. Precisely because of this, his current strength, compared to his 20-year-old self, has not declined but has grown even stronger. Even against an admiral, he was confident he could win. Trash is trash. Akainu lost patience when he saw the other party was incorrigible. It was simpler to just eliminate him directly. Great eruption. Akainu's furious grunts sounded again. He punched towards Bullet.
Whoosh! At the same time, Kizaru and Akiji soared into the air. They set their sights on Roxiu. They knew very well that one admiral alone couldn't completely restrain Roxiu. At least two would be needed for a chance to apprehend him. Of course, this was just what they thought. Admirals. You wouldn't want the complete destruction of the marine warships to be known by headquarters, would you? Roxiu's voice echoed faintly. What does he mean? Kizaru and Akiji frowned. The next moment, their expressions suddenly changed. They saw a huge explosive fireball forming in Roxiu's hand. Just as they realized something was wrong. The next moment, Roxiu's figure vanished directly. The fireball violently smashed towards the marine warships. Damn it! Kizaru was the first to react. He didn't expect Roxiu to target the marine warships. If it hit, the warship would sink instantly. Over 2,000 elite marine soldiers on board would perish. He didn't understand. How dare Roxiu do that? Did he not care about the black creatures also on the ship? In a flash, Kizaru transformed into a beam of light, streaking across the sky. Shining starlight offset the aftershocks of the explosive flame. However, this was just the beginning. Continuous explosive flames, at incredible speeds, kept smashing towards various marine warships. Ice ball. Ice balls condensed around Akiji's arm. Sandstorm. Crocodile, seeing this, immediately blocked Akiji's attack. Shiryu of the rain followed closely. Dong dong dong. Rumbling sounds were incessant, explosions echoed everywhere, and energy raged through this space. The marine vice admirals on the side all made their moves, dealing with the other heavy convicts. Marine rear admirals and marine soldiers fiercely fought with the Shadow Legion soldiers. The sounds of battle shook the heavens. Boom! After a while, only a violent explosion was heard. Under Akainu's magma iron fist, bullet was sent flying like a kite with a broken string. Similarly, Shiryu of the rain and Crocodile gained no advantage against Akiji. Even with the two of them working together, the combat power of an admiral could only delay them, completely unable to inflict any substantial damage. In the battlefield, Roxiu was in the best situation. Dealing with Admiral Kizaru, his old opponent, was effortless throughout the process. Explosive flames continuously impacted the marine warships. Under his conscious control, the marine soldiers on one warship were almost completely wiped out. The next moment, while Kizaru was dealing with the explosive flames, he leaped onto the warship. The shadow soldiers on the ship, as if long prepared, controlled the warship and slowly started it. Roxiu is leaving. Stop him! Kizaru shouted loudly upon seeing this. Akiji and Akainu's mouths twitched fiercely, and they decisively abandoned their current battles. They turned and rushed towards Roxiu. At this moment, half of the Shadow Legion, originally on various warships, instantly vanished like ghosts, then gathered in front of Roxiu's warship. Damn things! Let's eliminate them first. Akainu looked at these bewildering unfamiliar things, his gums seemingly about to shatter. They were several times more troublesome than those pirates. Thick smoke rose, and magma poured down, intending to annihilate the entire Shadow Legion. Boom! Firelight fell. The seawater continuously evaporated, and dense steam filled the entire space. However, something even stranger happened. The Shadow Legion, which should have been annihilated under the magma and was in front of Roxiu's warship, had somehow transformed into specters and appeared behind the three admirals. Dozens stood behind each of them. Their forms varied, and their eyes were cold. Spatial ability? The admirals were shocked. The Shadow Legion's unique ability allowed their shadows to move silently and incredibly fast through the spatial world. Damn it, Roxiu was really escaping with the warship. Crocodile also realized something was wrong, and his eye twitched fiercely. This fit his impression of Roxiu perfectly. He was too damn shameless. He actually left them to fight the Marines while he ran off alone on a warship. What happened to everyone advancing and retreating together by default?
Without the slightest hesitation. Taking advantage of the moment, the Shadow Legion temporarily trapped the admirals.
Crocodile transformed into sand and quietly landed on Roxiu's warship. Bullet and the other prisoners also noticed. After cursing them as shameless, they delivered their strongest blow to the pursuing vice admirals. Their bodies, however, honestly followed suit. At the same time, a loud bang came from above. The three admirals were only surrounded by the Shadow Legion for a moment before they scattered them all with lightning-fast methods. However, by the time they turned their attention back to Roxiu, the warship had already sailed a distance. Start the warships. Chase. Akaino looked at the marine soldiers, who had finally gotten a breather, and commanded. The soldiers immediately understood. Dong dong dong, the helmsman ran to the helm, controlling the warship to pursue Roxiu at full speed. However, the helm was completely destroyed. Admiral Sakazuki. The power system is damaged, and the warships cannot start. The same thing happened on several other warships. Chapter 109, Woohoo! Take off. Marineford. Fleet Admiral Sengoku saw this scene and was so angry he nearly smashed the screen hanging on the wall. The three admirals, a marine fleet no less powerful than a buster call, and the original forces within impel down. Combined, this force was originally enough to overwhelm any of the four Emperor crews. But now, they couldn't even stop the escaped convicts from impel down. Roxiu and the other prisoners just slipped away right under their noses. A great humiliation. When had the Marine ever been so exasperated? If this matter were to spread and be known by others on the Grand Line, the Marine's face would be mercilessly trampled into the ground. Along with it, the world government's prestige would also be greatly diminished. Absolutely not allowed. This kind of thing must never happen. There's still a chance. Sengoku calmed down. Even if Roxiu left in a warship, he was still within a controllable range. The seas of the Grand Line are covered with marine surveillance. As long as Roxiu leaves on a warship, his tracks can be found. After that, they can surround Roxiu's warship, even if it's just to delay for a moment. The marine admirals can arrive in time. Thinking of this, Sengoku immediately gave orders. He instructed the military seagulls circling above impel down to closely track Roxiu's position, and for the nearby branch marines to assemble urgently. Then, he picked up a Den Den Mushi and called Vice Admiral Mamanga, who was outside impel down. Fleet Admiral. Vice Admiral Mamanga was sweating profusely, his voice thick with difficulty. Since becoming a Marine, he had never felt such heavy pressure. This time, he truly experienced it. Yes, Fleet Admiral. Good. Mamanga hung up the phone. And the three admirals, the moment they discovered the shadow soldiers had disappeared, immediately refocused their attention on Roxiu. Without a warship for support, the three Logia ability users were helpless against the sea. Even if Admiral Akiji could freeze the sea, it would be impossible to maintain it for an extended period. Admiral Sakazuki, Fleet Admiral Sengoku has already organized forces to intercept Roxiu up ahead. Vice Admiral Mamanga reported the message from Sengoku to Akainu, who was the most emotionally volatile of the three. Understood. Warship, quickly repair the warship first. Akainu said in a deep voice. Although he was suppressing his inner rage, his anger could still be heard in his tone. The other two's expressions weren't much better. Who were they? Marine admirals. They were beings that would make any pirate tremble, and even the four emperors had to take them seriously. They were peak combatants who could contend with any strong individual of the current era. But this time, Marineford had mobilized such a large force, sending out almost half of its high-ranking combat power. Yet, they were once again defeated by Roxiu. No one could be happy at this moment. If this mission failed, the consequences were unimaginable. Just the bombing of Impel Down alone was enough to give them a headache. Admiral, the warship has been repaired. Should we start immediately? Every marine warship has a backup power system to prevent accidents during navigation. Replacing the system takes much less time than repairing it. For well-trained marine soldiers, this wouldn't take long. Hearing this, a hint of clarity finally appeared on Akainu's gloomy face. Chase, meanwhile, on the other side. Damn it! We finally escaped. The fresh air on the sea is great. I haven't felt this feeling in a long time. Freedom feels good. Those damned Marines actually sent 3 admirals and a marine fleet to intercept us. So we really hold a lot of weight in the Marines' minds. It seems our reputation still spreads across the seas. Oh, come on, the admirals are clearly here for Roxiu. On the warship's deck stood the heavy convicts who had escaped from Impel Down, laughing maniacally. The atmosphere was much more relaxed compared to inside Impel Down. At this moment, everyone's gaze involuntarily fell upon the young man standing on the deck. Although his final actions were somewhat despicable, it had to be admitted. He contributed the most to their successful escape this time. Roxia looked up at a 45-degree angle, his eyes fixed on the military seagulls rapidly following them in the sky. It's not over yet. The Marines won't give up so easily. Bullet followed Roxia's gaze and immediately understood his meaning. It's military seagulls, our route is being monitored. Crocodile, who had just relaxed, immediately tensed up again. Damn it, these persistent bastards. What should we do? If the seagulls can follow us, someone will definitely intercept us. The prisoners who had just been laughing maniacally immediately changed their expressions. They certainly didn't want to be caught again. They'd rather jump into the sea and die. Don't panic. Taking the warship is just a diversion. There's a backup plan, Roxia said with a relaxed expression. Having caused so much trouble for the Marines, he could figure out with his but that the Marines wouldn't let him go so easily. If hijacking a warship was enough to slip away from under the Marines' noses, then he would be underestimating this behemoth that had ruled the seas for so many years. Leaving in a warship was just the first step. As Roxia's thought moved, a dozen black soldiers appeared on the deck. They had Nike-shaped red eyes and 2 huge wings on their backs. The Flying Shadow Soldiers of the Night Bat Sublegion of the Shadow Legion. Black creatures. Weren't they outside Impel Down, restricting the Admiral's movements, and then dealt with by the Marine Admirals? What's going on? Am I seeing things? And how did they just appear? It's too mysterious. Seeing the black soldiers appear on the deck, Bullet, Crocodile, Shilyu of the Rain, and others couldn't help but frown. Like the Marines, they were also puzzled and couldn't understand these creatures. They clearly had physical forms, yet they could turn into shadows and move freely through space. Witnessing these things reappear so bizarrely sent shivers down their spines. They naturally couldn't know that the Shadow Legion was fundamentally an aggregate of energy and did not have death in the traditional sense. And the moment these flying shadow soldiers appeared, following Roxia's mental command, they flapped their wings and picked up the people on the deck one by one. Take off! Roxio hugged a soldier's thigh, defying gravity, and flew into the sky. Chapter 110, You Really Know How to Talk. Let's follow you. High in the sky, Roxia felt the strong wind in his face and raised an eyebrow. When would he be able to fly freely like this? Speak of the devil, and he shall appear. Just as he was thinking about this, a familiar voice echoed in his mind. Ding! Congratulations, host, you have activated the 6th talisman, Rooster Talisman. The next talisman, the Sheep Talisman, is activating, Rooster Talisman, Power of Levitation, allowing the holder to control objects to float. When used with the Rabbit Talisman, it can also enable flight, giving the holder the ability to control levitation. His system, oh system, you've really come at the right time. What should I say? Roxio couldn't help but complain inwardly. If you had activated earlier, why would I have bothered with all that effort? I would have just taken off on the spot. However, it's better late than never. With the Rooster Talisman, many things will be much more convenient later on. Is this what flying feels like?
At this moment, Crocodile listened to the whooshing sound in his ears, his thoughts soaring. It's really good, this feeling of looking down from above is really good. He had lived most of his life in this world, always staying on the sea or in Impel Down, and had never flown before. Looking down at the entire sea from above, he finally truly understood what perspective and vision meant.
No wonder Roxio was so strong. His vision was a whole level higher than his own. Also, it turns out this damn world isn't flat, it's round. Learn something new. Roxio, what are you going to do next?
Bullet was also in a good mood, but given the current situation, they hadn't completely escaped the Marines, so the next plan was clearly more important.
First, get rid of those annoying eyes. Otherwise, we will still be under Marine surveillance.
The flying shadow soldiers, under Roxio's will, instantly doubled their speed and rapidly headed towards the seagulls with the Den Den Mushi. The seagulls, originally circling high in the sky, showed a human-like fear in their round eyes. Caw caw. After a few cries, they flapped their wings, trying to escape. But their speed was no match for the flying shadow soldiers.
After catching up, Roxio grabbed a seagull, plucked its feathers, and then tossed it aside.
Fortunately, this was high in the sky. If it were on land, he would have made them into Orland's grilled wings. After clearing away the annoying seagulls, they were truly out of the Marines' control.
Even if the opponent tried any moves, they would lose their target. Where are you all going?
After dealing with the matter, Roxio looked at the prisoners who had escaped from Impel Down.
He had no obligation to keep carrying these people. So this sentence could also be interpreted as a dismissal.
Hurry up, pick a stop and get off quickly, I hate freeloaders the most.
The
prisoners were speechless.
They were now 3 no personnel who had just been released from prison.
It seemed they had no other choice but to continue being pirates.
But getting off now, wouldn't that be seeking death? However, they clearly remembered what Roxio had said in Impel Down. If you can stand out from level 6, then you have a chance to conquer the world together. It was obvious.
In the current situation, following Roxio was the best choice. Not only did they not have to fear marine pursuit, but they could also experience the feeling of flying.
The prisoners exchanged glances, seeing a hint of determination in each other's eyes. Roxio.
The Marines' power is immense, accumulated over many years, with deep foundations, and you are still young, the waters are too deep, and there are many things you can't grasp.
But we are different.
Regarding marine matters, we may not know everything like the back of our hand, but we know most of it. Although we suffered a loss this time, there is no doubt that their subsequent retaliation will be super doubled.
I won't say more, those who understand will naturally understand. In any case, relying solely on you and your forces behind you might be a bit tricky. However, if we join forces, we can completely overthrow Marineford, and even shake the world government. So, how about we cooperate and turn the Marines upside down?
And restore the prestige of pirates?
One of the prisoners looked at Roxio and said confidently.
His words were impassioned.
As if he were conducting a formal joint meeting.
He even analyzed the causes and effects for Roxio in a clear and logical manner.
Roxio's mouth twitched. Damn it! You really know how to talk. Aren't you pirates supposed to be uncultured?
Roxio narrowed his eyes slightly, glancing at the prisoner, sizing him up with a meaningful look.
The prisoner felt Roxio's intense gaze and unconsciously swallowed his saliva. Sweat involuntarily streamed down. His previous expression instantly crumbled. Boss Roxio. Please let us follow you. We will definitely not disappoint you.
His tone was very sincere.
He was just short of kneeling before Roxio. Roxio raised an eyebrow. That's more like it. Simple and clear. All that flowery preamble completely missed the point.
Those standing by my side all have at least admiral-level combat power.
Do you think you do? As soon as these words came out, the prisoners' hearts sank. They looked at each other. It seemed to be true. Roxio and Bogard both possessed the strength to directly contend with a Marine admiral.
Not to mention the other devils behind them, although they hadn't seen them, they were certainly not inferior. While they were top pirates on the high seas, compared to marine admirals, apart from Bullet, Shiryu of the Rain, and Crocodile, none of them were strong enough to withstand a single hand from an admiral.
However, you can go find someone first. Roxio skillfully guided them, revealing his ultimate goal.
The prisoners looked at Roxio with burning eyes, waiting for his next words.
His name is Marshall D. Teach, also known as Blackbeard. He is a dark fruit ability user. Go become his subordinates and be undercover. He will later search for devil fruits, secretly steal the devil fruits. Using the fruits as an intermediary condition can offset the inadequacy of your own strength.
Roxio slowly said. He had thought of this idea while still in Impel Down. This was also why he was willing to bring these prisoners who had fought their way out.
There were two reasons for doing this.
Firstly, Blackbeard had seen all the devil fruit encyclopedias and was a native of this world, so his familiarity with devil fruits would certainly surpass that of an outsider like Roxio. Secondly, Blackbeard possessed the dark fruit and, in the original story, founded a pirate crew and hunted devil fruits everywhere. Hunting devil fruits, killing an ability user who has already eaten a devil fruit, and then utilizing the proximity principle of the fruit's power. Combined with the dark fruit's ability, by placing a fruit that resembles the original fruit near the deceased, the ability can be copied, generating a new devil fruit.
Blackbeard would give these newly generated devil fruits to his subordinates. Shiryu of the Rain's clear fruit was one such example. Using these prisoners to obtain fruits from Blackbeard would not be a loss in any way. Moreover, it could be a sustainable development. Even if it didn't work out in the end, Roxio wouldn't lose anything.
Therefore, for him, rather than having these guys serve him like dogs and horses, it was better to have them follow Blackbeard.
As for recruiting Blackbeard as a subordinate, Roxio hadn't even considered it. A guy who could endure for decades in the Whitebeard Pirates has ambitions that are not ordinary. That's it for today. Meet you in next part.